Through this, we got so much to cover. This is insane. So we're living in a mixed-up world. We got survival tips on how to survive such a mixed-up world. I had promised last week that each week from now on is going to be more intense on home application, because now we're dealing with Xerxes and his wife Esther. They're going to start talking. So now we can start dealing with those type of dynamics, and it's going to be great, and it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to hate me, and it's going to be so fun. I mean, it is really going to be fun. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm not picking. If you say, "You're describing my marriage, quit picking on me," I'm not. I'm talking generics and generalities and looking what Scripture goes with it. If it hits you and you're offended, it's because it's the Spirit convicting, not me. So honor that and respect that and be ready for it. So here are the survival tips, though, up to this point. We learned tip number 1, that what is legal is not always moral. Therefore, submit to a triad of authority, starting with the home. Over that's the government. Over that is God as the universal authority. Tip number 2 was that we must be people of confession, repentance, and forgiveness, being initiators of that process. Tip number 3 was that we are to pursue Jesus, not self-glory like Xerxes was doing, nor comfort like the Jews were doing. Okay, so we need to pursue Jesus. And number 4 is to choose purity over compromise. Choosing purity over compromise. As you may recognize, these are action steps that are not just thou shalt not. These are what to do in place of the shall nots. So it's a great, full, holistic and full approach to this. Hopefully you'll see that part of it. It's really tempting for churches to tell everyone what they're not about, and really hard to say what they are about. That's why these are worded the way that they're worded. Tip number 5, life is out of your control, but not out of God's. It's hard to see the end from the middle. Tip number 6 is that we're to be people of truth, to seek it, learn it, and speak it. Okay, that was one you guys picked. Thank you for that. And then tip number 7 is to draw close to Jesus and let Jesus draw close to you. Tip number 8, which is what we learned last week, is to be people of hope and action. Okay, to be people of hope and action. That as we recognize that change is possible and that there is something we could do to bring about change, that hope will lead us toward actually acting. But if we feel like that change is not possible or there's nothing we can do about it anyways, it will lead us away from hope to hopelessness and helplessness, and therefore not acting at all. And so we must be people who look at situations as change is possible and let that hope move us to act. And if you want more on that, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook. You can watch the whole video from last week. That leaves us to today here at the beginning of chapter 5, and this is going to be touchy, and it's going to be fun. And I know all of you woke up this morning hoping and praying to hear a sermon on this topic. Tip number 9 is to respect authority, even when those in authority are not respectable. Okay, so we're going to learn how we can respect authority, even when those in authority are not respectable. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today in Esther chapter 5. So here's what we're going to be looking at. Esther had just been confronted by Mordecai, even threatened by Mordecai, and finally she said, fine, I will concede, I will talk to my husband on behalf of the Jewish people, and if I die, I die, we'll see what happens. She said, meanwhile, and Esther gives a command, and it's awesome that now she is growing a backbone. She's being a bold woman who gives commands rather than just hopelessly, helplessly, like a stick in a river current, just taking whatever comes at her way. Now she's really trying to go upstream a little bit. She tells Mordecai what to do. And she says, pray, get everyone praying, 3-day fast. And I'm not talking like our traditional Jewish fast where you just, you pray all day and then you eat at supper time and then you go to bed. I'm talking, don't even eat supper. Don't have a bedtime snack. Don't do anything. For 3 days and 3 nights, fast completely. Okay, very unusual, because if you don't eat after 3 days, you really get in a bad place. You don't drink much in 3 days, you get in a bad place. Okay, so usually Jews would fast by praying during the day, but they always would eat at supper time to help keep their strength up. So that's how Jewish fasting usually happened. And so Esther's saying, no, let's not do it the way grandpappies used to do it. We're doing it differently because in 3 days I'm going to go to the king. So pray and fast for 3 whole days, day and night. Okay, day and night. Don't raid the fridge at 1 a.m. No. It's day and night. Okay, so we're going to see what happens when we start looking at verse 1. It starts off with the 3rd day. And verse 1 says this. It says, on the 3rd day. Let's stop there. Okay, so that means that on the 3rd day, the fast is now to be over. Okay, the fast is now absolutely to be over, and now it's going to be the moment of doom. Deadline is up. It is time for her to put the rubber to the road and get before her husband, and if she dies, she dies. If she lives, she lives. Will she live or die? If you're reading this for the very first time, you don't know. This is building suspense. I love the author of this. We don't know who wrote it. Maybe Mordecai, maybe someone else. We don't know who wrote it. And I love how the author works this in. It's such suspense. On the third day, okay, so it's over now. Okay, what's going to happen next? And so we find out that Esther's going to enter the courtyard. And it's a long, drawn-out little bit here that goes on. There's detail here to slow down the reader. It doesn't allow you to jump to what happens. Okay, and there's no fast forward. There's no chapter selection on the DVD here. You just got to get through the details. And this is fascinating how this works. So verse 1 continues. So on the third day, Esther dressed up in her royal clothing. That's interesting. And she stood in the inner courtyard of the palace, facing it. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal courtroom, facing its entrance. You see the detail on this? Okay, this is really how the Persians structured their palace was that wherever the throne was, when the throne gets placed, you can, at whatever entrances you go in, you always see the throne, and there's never a bad seat. Okay, there's never, everyone, no matter where you stand, you will be able to see the throne, and the king can see you. Okay, so now she walks into the courtroom, but notice there's this implication that the king sitting on this throne is literally, she's walking in, and she stands there. And she's just waiting quietly. She's just like the subtle little, I'm entering into the room. Now everyone sees her. So who knows how many thousands of people are likely in this big old palace, okay? There's all these bodyguards, and there's his 7 people that are in his inner circle, and so there's people that are there, and now they see her, and she's unannounced, right? She didn't send an invitation. She didn't get a request. Nothing's come about. She hasn't seen or heard from her husband in 30 days. I don't know if he's a truck driver, but she hasn't seen him in a long time, okay? It's been 30 days. She's been concerning that maybe her airbags that she grew over years, or she's concerned that her crow's feet might have worn off the affection of her husband. Maybe he doesn't love her anymore. She doesn't know, but she hasn't seen him in a month. Now she's just going to walk right in, and she just stands there. What's going to happen? And that's where we see it continue here in verses, the rest of 1 and 2 and 3. It says, as soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard. So she does not approach the king. Okay, she just walks in. That's it. She stands there. Now everyone's noticing, and they're going, oh, what? I didn't see her on the roster. She's not on the guest list. This is not part of our agenda that the king sent out. The agenda is clearly a booze, party, bands, a jester, the execution of the jester for bad jokes, and more party, more drinking. That's what we see in there's no queen here. What, why, and what? So everyone's noticing what's going to happen. Okay, so as soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the courtyard, she won his approval. In other words, he looked at her and went, oh, baby, I forgot how hot you were. Okay, that's basically what that was. Okay, so he looks at her and he says, yeah, oh yeah, by the way, oh yeah, Queenie, holy cow, you're uninvited. This is a problem. So what does the king do? He extends the gold scepter in his hand toward Esther. Okay, because the rule is if you approach the king unannounced, you die. Unless the king decides to extend the scepter towards you. And then what you're supposed to do is go over and touch the scepter to accept the king's invitation, and on you get to go. Okay, because if the king just doesn't do that and you can just approach the king whenever, then he was in error to not summon you. And the king can't be in error. He's like God in a sense, okay? So he can't be in error. So therefore, he has to extend the invitation. So he extends the scepter toward Esther. This is the invitation. You may approach me. She then leaves from the entrance and starts walking up as she approached and touched the tip of the scepter. What is it, Queen Esther? The king asked her. Now, I want to pause there for a moment. What is it? The phrase in Hebrew literally is translated, what to you? Okay, that's literally how it reads. It's what to you? Okay, and does that sound rough and gruff? Because it is. The king's a little annoyed, okay? He's a little frustrated with her. The grammar here is actually very tense. It literally is kind of him saying, what do you think in the name of Persia are you doing? You about caused me to have another pageant. Okay, what do you think you're doing? What is up with you? What's wrong with you? Is kind of the statement. It says, okay, touch, okay, Esther, what the heck? What's going on? And then he says, so what do you? Tell you what, whatever you want, even up to half the kingdom, it'll be given to you. This is a general phrase usually said quite often to anybody that approaches the king. It's a very lavish, I am so wealthy, I could give up 50% of my kingdom. I wouldn't even notice it was gone. Okay, that's what that statement is. It's literally this great little grand. In fact, Xerxes offered this over and over again to countless people. Actually end up leading to somebody actually requested a lady requested a certain robe that belonged to Vashti that ended up being led to the death of his brother and Xerxes' brother, and ended up really getting him right in the hind end. But nonetheless, here's kind of what's happening here. So I want you to kind of see what's all happening. I want you to picture a scene where there's a nice little throne, and Xerxes is a handsome guy, perhaps, maybe a little Marlon Brando-ish, and he's sitting down. Maybe he has a cat. And Esther comes in and he's like, I make you part of my family. I had you part, you almost caused me another pageant. I'll make you an offer and don't refuse it. Mikasa sukasa. Okay, that's kind of what's going on here. Okay, so that's the place. That's what's taking place here. So Esther hears the Mikasa Sukasa, and she goes, okay, your home is my home. Awesome. Thank you very much, King. I'm really glad that I didn't lose my head. I'm rather attached to it, and I'd rather not go through that. It's such a pain in the neck to lose that. But thank you, King. And what she does is that in verse 4, and we're only going to cover the first few words. And thank you, camera operator, for laughing at that pain in the neck joke and losing my head. I really appreciate that you got it. Everyone else is like, what's happening next? But he's over there. And so I appreciate that. Kudos to you. That's on YouTube now. And so, so what she does at the beginning of verse 4 is she starts with a very interesting phrase. And we're not going to cover her request about dinner at all. She says, if it pleases the king. Check it out. Verse 4. If it pleases the king. Okay, so that's what she says. If it pleases the king. In other words, king, this is totally up to you. This is gutsy, right? Because she's there to try to save the lives of 1 million or whatever Jews. She's there to save the lives of an ethnicity, of a people group over the course of several countries in the span of the Persian Empire. And she's there, and Mordecai had told her, perhaps it's for a time such as this. Maybe, through all your bad choices and our bad choices and God's providence, that God is using our bad choices and our good choices all together to bring about a chance of deliverance and restoration. Maybe, Esther, you're queen because God in all of our sin has chosen to bless us anyway. Maybe for just such a time as this. And so she's there, ready to do what could be an amazing thing to do, and she says, king, it's in your court. If it pleases the king. Okay, and it's amazing that she does that. And I want you to see the character of Esther here, because she hasn't talked much, right? She has not talked much. She hasn't said much. She hasn't indicated much. She's been like a stick in a river, just kind of going with the flow. That's all she's really been doing. She hasn't said a lot, hasn't commanded a lot. Now we get to see her character. So here's what we end up discovering a little bit about Esther, and I want you to see this. Esther is a respectful woman. And I want you to see this. This is amazing to see this of her. It's one of her best qualities, that she is a absolutely respectful woman. She is a wise woman who is demonstrating wisdom in a powerful way through the actions of respect. And you can see this starting off with her dress and her demeanor. Because how does she go before the king? Okay, and she goes before the king in what type of clothing? The royal robe. She didn't wear whatever she got dressed up. Okay, she got prepared. She had a plan. She knew what she was doing, and she knew that if she wore the dress that was cut down to here with a slit up to there, that the king would likely notice her in a favorable way. She was prepared in advance, okay? And so she goes in with her royal robes looking like a queen into the courtyard. And it's a gorgeous outfit she has on. Her hair is all done up. It's absolutely amazing that she goes in a respectful way. She doesn't charge to her husband. She does what in the courtyard? She stands. Okay, and the queen, you would think, a lot of times the queen sometimes will sit, if the king requests her, at the throne next to the king. She doesn't just go and sit in her place. She waits until the king requests her. It's very fascinating, the type of respect here. And here's the wisdom of this type of respect. And I'm just going to give you an inside edge, ladies. If you want to best influence your husband, show respect to the husband. If you want to be influential, and you should be influential, you should influence your husband. In fact, you notice that the Bible says that men love your wives, but wives, the word love isn't there. What does it say? Respect your husbands. What the Bible's doing is telling the wives to be influential and how to get there. What's the best way to be the most positive influence to help the husband do what you want him to do? It's how to be that type of an influence. And so the Bible does not put women down on this. It's an empowering how to be the best influence you can most possibly be. Okay, so when King Xerxes looks out and he sees his wife in royal robes standing at the entrance waiting for him, what does he see? Does he see a wife being rude and barging in, or does he see a respectful woman? See, and he's seeing himself, what he is seeing for himself is absolutely a respectful woman. And when she talks to him, how does she talk when her first phrase is uttered after he extends the scepter? And she comes in and taps the tip of the scepter. And then he says, "What's up? Mikasa Suka." So you gave me a heart attack. What's up? And then her first phrase, is it yelling at him? Is it screaming at him? Does she have her hands on her hip? Is she tapping her foot, doing the chicken neck? You know, it wouldn't kill you to have dinner with me once in a while. You know, is she doing anything like that? No. Okay, she's talking in what way? Respectfully. So see that in verse 4. When you look at that and you see, if it pleases the king, okay, she is being absolutely direct. She is being bold. She is being courageous. And she's being wise and respectful. So I just want you to see how respectful she is being here at this. And there's a great message here for guys and gals, for men and women both, regardless of age, is how are you going to treat those in authority over you? Because whatever your situation may be, this is a great picture for you. If you're a young person, maybe it would be your parents. If you're an employee, then it might be your employer. If you're, whatever the case may be, if you're a church member, that might be whether it's this church or a church of people that are watching online. We have several churches that watch online. It would be the church member and the elders or the pastor board or whatever the case may be. If you're a citizen of a country, it would be the government, and on it goes. Whatever your situation is, we're all in some way under authority. And how are we going to approach those when we're under their authority? Whether they're right or not. Whether we think they're right or respectful or not. Because let me ask you something. Is Xerxes an honorable man? No. The dude is wasting billions of dollars per month on parties and booze. The dude is one of the turning points of the fall of the Persian Empire. Okay, we had Cyrus and King Darius. They built the empire. It was amazing and it was powerful. It was in its heyday. Xerxes is the beginning. He and his son are the beginning of the downfall of the Persian Empire because of their spending and their partying and their pursuit of self-glory. Okay, and he's not a respectable man. He's going around doing bachelor in Persia, kidnapping and abducting all these virgin women so he can sleep with them to see who's the best in bed. He's a pervert. Okay, so we have a real problem with Xerxes. He's not a moral man. He's not a good man. He's not a respectable man. He's not an honorable man. He's willing to sign off at the blink of an eye the death of hundreds of thousands, if not a million or more Jews, and then drink afterwards with a party, celebrating his decision. Okay, he's not a good man. And yet, how does Esther reproach him? With respect. So how do you approach your boss, even if you think they're in the wrong and they don't understand and their way is stupid and your way is better? How do you approach your parents if you're under their authority? How do you approach anybody of any type of authority that is over you? How do you approach them? Do you approach them with respect, even if you think they're in the wrong? How do you approach them? And we see Esther approaching with great respect, and it's absolutely amazing. And I really would like to give some real practical applications on this for a moment before we continue on to the next part of Esther's character here. And that is dealing with that marriage dynamic of how she's talking with King Xerxes, because it's fascinating what she's doing here. And I'm going to talk in some generalities, and there might be some exceptions. Let me just lay this card on the table. I'll call it the 80-20 card. This will apply to maybe 80% of men, and 20% will be the exception. So if you happen to say, that doesn't fit me at all, well, then you might be that 20%, whatever, that's fine. And it could be that you think you're the 20%, but everybody who knows you says, no, you're that 80. Congratulations. You just don't see it. Okay, so let me just kind of share a little bit about men and women, the differences. It will help a little bit with the a marriage relationship, I believe. So check this out. I'll pull a whole bunch of marriage counseling at you. This is what one of my strong specialties is marriage counseling. So I love talking about it and doing it and getting involved in it. So check this out. Men and women, first of all, are dynamically different. Okay, that's 5 years of education right there. Okay, they are dynamically different, all right? In fact, I heard one psychologist liken them on a physical level when it comes to physical intimacy, that men are like microwaves and women are like crock pots. And it's not that the crock pot doesn't initiate the intimacy physically in the bedroom. It's still, even if they're the initiator, it is still they need to warm up physically before they're ready to actually have your entree, okay? So I'm trying to talk as politely as I can, okay? So men are like microwaves, though. They're ready to go. A woman says, hey, I'm thinking maybe tonight, and he's like, already undressing. You ready? Let's go for it. And he's ready to go. And she's like, hold your horses. I need a little bit of warming up here, okay? To just give me a moment, right? Okay? Now, verbally, it's directly the opposite. Women tend to be like microwaves, and men are like crock pots on a verbal nature. Women can go to verbal intimacy very deep right away. Okay, like a microwave. 30 seconds on high, we're ready to go, we're hot, and we're going. We can get verbally, emotionally talking right away. Men, on the other hand, are like a crock pot. They need to warm up to it. They need to kind of get ready for that type of verbal intimacy. Okay, so it's a way of looking at it would be something kind of like this. Women, here's a helpful tool for you. Because really, if you want to have a really good marriage, a good question to really ask yourself is not, how do I have a better marriage? It really should be, how do I be a better spouse? Okay, because if you say I want to have a better marriage, that tends to imply that the other person has to change. But if you say, how can I be a better spouse, that means you start with the only person you can change, that's you. Okay, so really don't ask how to have a better marriage. Ask, how can I be a better spouse? Start there. And one of the best ways to start being a better spouse is to be an expert of understanding who your spouse is and how they communicate. Okay, because you'll find that a lot of breakdown, a lot of frustrations within a marriage is a communication issue, right? That's a big part of it, is how to talk through things. So let me just give you some communicational guidelines. So women, here's some insight for you about men. I'll get to unload this for you just a little bit. Men love communicating love communication when it comes to warming up like a crock pot toward verbal intimacy. They want to have it be like either a movie trailer or like an ESPN moment. Okay, what they want to have is the highlight first, and then the details about the highlight afterwards. That's what they tend to really appreciate. Okay, or like a preview. They want to see the preview first, the movie afterwards. Okay, you kind of, or like a replay. If something happened in a game, you have the replay, and then you talk about the replay afterward. So, for example, let's say a woman were to call up her husband on the phone, and he answers, goes, hello, he's at work, goes, hello, and she says, honey, this morning, I got up, and I got everything ready, and I'm brushing my teeth, and then all of a sudden, I ran out of toothpaste, and it was really annoying, and the dog, was chewing on my toothbrush. I found out afterwards when I saw bristles in his mouth, and I got out and I get to work, and I'm here. I'm at the water cooler meeting with some people, and we had a meeting. It was horribly boring. And after the meeting got done, we went back to the water cooler to get some refreshments, get some donuts, and then doggone it, this person came by, said this to me, and it really hurt my feelings. And I just would love to talk to you about this because I'm hurting right now. Okay, now, likely, some women are like, oh, what was said to her? What was this fight about? What had happened? And the men are like, dude, just stop. Okay, and it can get frustrating real quick because of that type of dialogue. So then he's like doing whatever, and she says something, asks him a question, he goes, yeah, whatever, and he's not really paying attention. And the women are like, oh, you're not even listening to me, aren't you? And I can see people are like, this was this morning. Okay, and what would be ESPN would be this. Woman calls up on the phone, he says hello, and then she says, someone just hurt my feelings today, and I just would really want to hear your voice and talk to you about it. And then he would be like, wow, what happened? Now, let's say, well, I got up this morning, and this was my day, and my day was really stinky, and then I get this. Okay, now he's warming up to it because he got that highlight trailer first. You kind of see how that works. Okay, and so that's the kind of thing you want to do, and just kind of treat it in that nature. Because in all reality, when you think about the difference between men and women when it comes to their verbal communication, in that note, men and women are as different as cats are from dogs. And men are like cats and women are like dogs when it comes to verbal issues. I know you might be like, whoa, that's backwards, man. What are you talking about? Are you calling a woman a dog? I'm not saying she is a dog. I'm saying she is like a dog. It is a metaphor. Okay, but here's kind of what I'm talking about here, is that when you think of a cat, okay, and you think of a cat, men are like cats. They tend to do their own thing, their own way, whether it's most convenient or not is not the issue. Okay, and they tend to really be by themselves a little bit. They tend to be more of a loner. They can be that isolated person and be just fine. And if they want a woman to be with them, they want them to be in the room, but not necessarily involved or engaged. Okay, they just like having their presence around. So they're kind of like a cat in that regard. Dogs are not that way, are they? No, dogs are a little bit different. Dogs want to get your attention and want to be right there, right now, going, oh, pet me, pet me, pet. I'm talking verbal, okay? And they're like right there. And they're like, come on, I just want to be with you. I want to be near you. I want to talk. I want to show you what I did over here on the floor. And they just are just wanting to share with whatever. Again, I'm saying metaphorically speaking, it would be what project they got started. Okay, so it's that type of a thing. And so men or women are, so women, what I would say to you, for you to learn about your husband is to look at what shows he watches. And study that. How is that show communicating to your husband? And try to learn from that structure. Does he like watching ESPN? Does he like watching sport highlight reels? Does he like watching Gunsmoke? Whatever it is, figure out what it is he's watching and try to be, don't take this to the extreme. I'm not saying that if your husband is a big WWE fan, that you go, ladies, and you wire up lights in the living room, show up in a WWE warrior bikini saying dinner's ready, because that's just, that would be fun. I might actually not be late for dinner that day, but I'm not saying thematically like that. I'm saying structurally, okay? Structurally. Try to see how he's being communicated to, how he is used to it, how he appreciates it, how he likes it, and therefore try to mimic that type of a thing. Try to follow suit in that way. How does King Xerxes like to be talked to? With great respect, submission, honor. That's how King Xerxes, King Ahasuerus, that's how he likes being talked to. And so what does Esther do? She doesn't talk like she wants to talk. She talks like her husband wants to be talked to. So she shows up and follows all protocol. I'm not saying that women should just walk into a room, stand, and wait for the husband to extend a scepter. I'm not saying that at all. We're not in Persia. We're in America. It's a little bit different. Okay, so it's not like that at all. It's not like touch the end of my remote control. Now we can talk. I'm not talking about that a bit. Okay, I'm just saying that you want to talk like the person appreciates. Okay, and men likewise. Try to figure out how your woman likes to talk and how it is they appreciate it. And the same rule applies the other direction so that you can talk in a way that she would appreciate and she would honor. Are you going to screw it up? Yes, more than she will. And that's going to be but you got to practice and keep working at it. And she will feel honored and really empowered just that you're trying. It really is going to be an amazing thing within the marriage there, communicatively speaking, to at least try to work and see how does she like to be talked to. She likes the story and the details, which means you might have to rehearse a little bit before you start a communication until you get used to remembering the details. That's some of the things that I do from time to time. I actually, before I approach my wife, I play it out in my head a little bit. How can I best do this? I can say this, and then this, and then this, and then I sit down with her and I start. And we have some great communication time that way, and it becomes very intimate and very nice, verbally speaking. And so be the student. Get a PhD in your spouse. Okay, be the student of your spouse and learn them well. That's what Esther is doing. She is learning what it means and has learned what it means to respect her husband and how he feels respected. And she is doing those things. Okay, which means that Esther, since she is trying to influence her husband using respect, Esther is a wise woman. She is a wise woman. We've already said this a couple of times, but I really want to point this part out because this is absolutely important as well, is that I think what we are seeing here is Esther being an example, an illustration of wisdom like we would find from the book of Proverbs. That she's being a demonstration, an illustration of proverbial wisdom, but not in the way you might expect. And very much in the way you might expect. We're going to change this, and at the end, nothing's going to have changed, but everything would have changed. Okay, so we're going to have a Mark Hamill moment, and we're just going to really play into this and see what takes place here. When we look at the book of Proverbs, I just want to lay out Proverbs for you for a moment so we can see how this applies to Esther and why I think she's an illustration of this book in a great way. When we look at the book of Proverbs, the Proverbs is all about wisdom, what wisdom is like, what is wisdom, what is folly, and how a person can gain wisdom and be a wise person. Okay, that's what the book of Proverbs is about. It's about wisdom, how to get wisdom, and how to be a wise person. Okay, so you'll find that in the book of Proverbs, a wise person seeks understanding, a fool seeks folly and self-gratification. Okay, you'll find that type of a theme throughout the book of Proverbs. And Proverbs has within it 3 types of Proverbs. Okay, all of the book of Proverbs can be broken down to 3 structural or 3 categorical types. And those are, the first 2 are My Son poems, and another one is called Lady Wisdom poems. And the My Son poems are where they usually start with the phrase like, "Hear, my son, hear, O sons." Those are My Son poems. They start with or have at the beginning something about talking to someone's son. Okay, then Lady Wisdom poems will start with the word wisdom and then personifies wisdom like a person, usually as a woman. Okay, so then we get wisdom shouts, and we get does not wisdom, and we get several one-liners like that. Wisdom has built, wisdom laments, and she says. And so we get several times the word wisdom being likened to a person that is with a she type of a statement to it. Like in chapter 1, verse 20, wisdom shouts and into the streets, or happy is a person who finds wisdom because she offers life, and on the Lady Wisdom poems and Proverbs go. Then there are one-liners for a good chunk of the book of Proverbs. So you go through you have the introduction first off, then you have the My Son and Lady Wisdom, My Son, Lady Wisdom poems, then a whole chunk of one-liners that seem to have no context with each other whatsoever. And there's some great one-liners that are in there, like don't talk too much, it fosters sin, be sensible, turn off the flow, Proverbs 10:19. There's one of my more favored ones, a woman who is beautiful but lacks discretion is like a gold ring and a pig's snout. That was one of my more favored ones. Or a fool is quick-tempered, but a wise person stays calm when insulted. That's awesome. Okay, that needs to be shared all over downtown Grand Rapids. I'm just telling you that right now. Someone says something might be insulting, they go, "What, you trying to say something about what? What, you trying to?" And they just get all uncalm right away. And Proverbs says, no, a wise person stays calm when insulted. Or it is poor judgment to co-sign a friend's note to become responsible for a neighbor's debt. And so Proverbs says, yeah, co-signing, not a good idea. And then there's another one. This is the teenager's favorite one. Do not love sleep or you will end in poverty. This is great for teenagers. But you see, we got all these one-liners that are there. And then, after the one-liners are done, we get one last chapter of the book of Proverbs, chapter 31. And chapter 31 often tends to be what tends to be called the woman's lament. Not that it's about a woman's lament, but that women lament the existence of chapter 31, because it seems to describe this quote-unquote absolutely perfect woman. And women look at it and they say, this is impossible. How could a wife be like this? This is ridiculous. And then men tend to say, well, we have to be like Jesus, so it's okay to be like Proverbs 31, to which really women have to be like Jesus too. So that means they have Jesus and Proverbs 31, which really stinks. And allow me just to kind of unwind this and reinterpret Proverbs 31 for you in a very unique way. And that is that when you see Proverbs chapter 31, the very first verse starts off with "my son," which means then Proverbs 31, half of it is a what type of a poem? My son poem, okay? And then in the middle of it, you start getting another poem. There's a break, there's another poem, and it starts talking about a good wife who can find. Okay, now when does another poem exist that is about a feminine type word that is often another type of poem that we find in the book of Proverbs? It's what type? Not a my son poem, but a Lady Wisdom poem. Okay, so what we find is that the second half of Proverbs 31 is actually a Lady Wisdom fully personified as a woman. And we get to see what wisdom looks like, applied therefore then to both men and women, because it's about wisdom, not woman. And then people might ask, well, then why is wife used then instead of woman? And for two reasons. One, that Lady Wisdom poem is an acrostic poem. Wife is the first word, and the word wife in Hebrew begins with the letter A. So why is wife chosen and not woman? Because of that. Okay, and secondly, because we are supposed to marry wisdom and not have an affair with folly. That is a constant recurring repetitive theme throughout Proverbs as well. You marry wisdom and you do not have an affair with folly. Okay, so don't go playing around with folly when you're supposed to have wisdom as your wife. So what we then find is that Proverbs 31 is actually the full personification of wisdom at work. Being personified because wisdom is a feminine word as a woman, and so we get that type of a structure. So that's what's going on with that. So then the question then comes, what is this wisdom that Proverbs 31 perfectly personifies, and how is Esther a picture of this? How is her character and her demeanor and her attitude a great illustration of this wisdom at play? And so what I will share with you is a quick outline, all at once, of the outline of what is wisdom defined by the book of Proverbs. Isn't this nice? Aren't you glad you came today? And so we have that wisdom is diligent. Wisdom has a keen sense for business matters. Wisdom is compassionate. Wisdom is prepared for the future. Wisdom is a good teacher. Therefore, the wise are good students and have a teachable spirit, and they will accept correction well. Wisdom is dedicated to family, both spiritual and physical, both the body of Christ as well as what you have within your biology. And then lastly, wisdom is respectful. Okay, this is how wisdom is personified throughout the book of Proverbs, especially and completely, encompassingly, chapter 31. And for 20-some verses, we get this type of a picture. Now, let me ask you, don't you see Esther all over this now when she starts to approach the king? Okay, she's being diligent. She even has multiple dinners. We'll talk about that later and what's going on with that. She has a sense for business. She understands how to deal with this, and she approaches it like a business transaction, even getting Haman involved in the dinner. We'll see that next time as well. She's very compassionate about what she's doing. She is preparing for the future. She is learning how to be wise. Therefore, she respects that wisdom is a good teacher. She becomes dedicated to the family. She's dedicated not only to Mordecai, but now finally to the other Jews, but she's also dedicated to whom? Her husband, the king. Okay, that's hard when you have your dedications at each other's throats. And when you start getting into mixed up, messed up homes, doesn't that happen? That you get people that you love, and you love them both, and you love them equally though different, and you see them hate each other. And no matter who it is, you end up trying to help. The other one sees that you're picking sides. And how hard it is to try to deal with that type of dynamic. And here Esther is having to deal with that. She loves Mordecai, and he's going to die because of her husband. And she loves her husband and wants to respect her husband. And so she's trying to deal with her husband and trying to deal with Mordecai, trying to deal with Jews. And we got Haman in the mix. And we got a real mess. Haman's in a position of great authority, so she has to show him respect as well. That's one of the reasons she invites him to dinner and doesn't just lay it all out on the table, because she wants to be respectful across the board. Okay, and wisdom is respectful. And so it is an awesome thing to see Esther demonstrate, be an illustration of wisdom, proverbial wisdom. And this is a chance for every man and every woman that is here or online or anywhere else or under any type of authority. You have that opportunity, especially if you're dealing with like your boss, to be able to be all about business matters and how to make the company thrive and to be profitable, not to grumble about different levels of management are paid higher than the lower levels. That's the way business works, and that's the way that it is. And to be able to say, how can I help this business be more profitable as a business, not just more profitable to me, and how can I have that keen sense of business matter, and to be able to approach my boss with respect, with honor, to be able to influence from that type of a direction. This is what wisdom is. And Esther personifies this so amazingly. And here's where wisdom all starts. In case you're wondering, where does this start? How do I begin to even get wisdom of any kind? And we are so grateful that Proverbs actually tells us how to get wisdom, where this starts. And this is where it started for Esther too. I believe this 100%. Esther started wisdom right here. It's at chapter 1, verse 7 of Proverbs, and it says that wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. And by fear of the Lord, that is actually not talking about, ironically enough, it is not talking about respectful fear. Okay, a lot of people have tried, and a lot of scholars have tried to say that it's all about respectful fear. It's this, oh, look how great God is type of a thing with fear, because they are trying to deal with the cultural shift between millennials and the older way of looking at Scripture, to where fear used to be this hellfire and brimstone fear, and they're trying to get away from that and to say it's about respectful fear. And so that's what they've been doing, try to reach the millennials. And the problem with that is that sometimes the word fear in the Bible is actually about fear. Like we are as afraid of God as we would be of our dad when he undoes his belt and says, come here. Okay, that there is fear of judgment. There is fear about a holy God and that we are an unholy people. That there is fear that there could be retribution. That there is a fear that says that I want to be more concerned about what God thinks than I am about what other people think. And if you have that type of fear, that you fear more about what God thinks than what people think, you will begin the path of wisdom. That's where wisdom starts. And then from there, showing respect to the authority, caring about what they think, just caring about what God thinks more. Because remember, this means that Esther 5 begins where Esther 1 left us off in the very first sermon. We're to submit to that triad of authority. If ever that our home or our government or our employer tells us to do something unethical or immoral or something that is sin, we fear God more than we fear them. We care more what he thinks than what they think. And so we disobey that authority in order to obey God first, because he is that top authority. And as long as the two are not in disagreement, then we also care what the people think. We also care what our bosses think, and we try to do our best to respect them, to honor them, and to work with them, to help influence them in a way that is honorable and respectful. We work with what they want in their way. And we do worry about what they think. Several times throughout Scripture, we find even Paul saying to care about what other people think. He says, if you want to find yourself a pastor, you want to find yourself an elder or a deacon, they have to have a good reputation with outsiders. That means that they care about what lost people think about the church and how they perceive the church, and they do their best to present things in the most honorable way they can. They do their best to have good relationships with those people. That's one of the goals of Christian living, is to care about what people think, to care about how they see the church, and to try to work with that and try to paint the best, most positive picture possible so that there's no barriers between us and the gospel and lost people. That's one of the goals. And that needs to be that way with us and the authority that we submit to. That we try to remove those barriers and we try to care what they think and how they perceive. And true wisdom starts with caring about what God thinks first. That's where it all starts. And with Esther, once Mordecai told her, it could be that for such a time as this, in other words, God may be the one really working this out now. He's involved in this. Let's worry about what God thinks. And then Esther says, okay. If God is really working in my life, if he's not as absent as I've been thinking he was, he is very present and very much working. If he is can use all my screw-ups and all my laziness and all my apathy and all my bad choices and my good choices, if he can use all of that, okay, then I'll do this. So that was a great moment of revival in the life of Esther. And we see that play out in an outward expression of wisdom and respect. So that throws it then to all of us. How do you fear God? Or do you fear man more than God? Do you have it all backwards? You are more concerned about what people think than you are about what God thinks. You need to get that priority straightened up right away. And from there, how are you going to show respect to those who are over you, to those who work with you? How are you going to display wisdom in that way? If you're married and you have that where one is a Christian and the other one is not, and that tends to often happen that the woman is the Christian and the man is not. It does happen the other direction, but it's a lot less common. Okay, and so a lot of times women tend to see a man that's not a Christian, and either they will compromise their faith or say they will get saved because of our relationship. That tends to be a dynamic that happens often. When men are Christians, they tend to look for that Christian woman that can be that godly mother. That tends to be what happens, not always, but that tends to be the case. And so if you're a woman who is married to a non-Christian man, how do you show respect to that husband? How do you show honor? How are you communicating in a way that they would be lifted up and would be, in a sense, honored by? Men, how do you do that with your wives? How do you do that with your bosses? How do you do that with your teachers? How do you do that with your parents, and et cetera, et cetera? So this week, let's be people of wisdom and people of respect. Let's have a closing word of prayer.